I was born between two worlds. My mother breathed Earth's air, and my skin carried the yellow hue of Martian dust. My cradle was a station that rose along with hope and rules. They called me a hybrid, an experiment, a mistake, names that sounded like sentences. My father, the man who ruled New Eden, liked to say things with precision. Here, survival is pure biology. What he always meant was, purity is power. When I was 16, during a formal dinner, he looked at me coldly and said, "You don't belong here. You never did?" It was a short, sharp sentence, but it left a long trail inside me, a gravity that pulled everything around it. My mother looked at him, then at me. Her eyes shone as if she wanted to undo his words, but no one at that table dared to contradict the governor. I left the table feeling hollow, as if every compliment, every promise of future, had been erased by that one comment. I spent years trying to belong. I studied diplomacy, learned to repair solar panels, mastered support systems, and learned to speak in council meetings. But politics is a tide, and I was always the one swept to the edge. When my name finally reached the top of the candidate list for a position of responsibility, the opposition grew louder. My blood was a problem for some. For my father, the choice of an heir was a matter of image and control. On the day I was exiled, the morning seemed normal. The shadows long, the solar panels glistening with synthetic dew. The council session was as swift as a death sentence. They removed me from office, seized my credentials, and without lengthy speeches, decreed that I should be sent to Deimos Reach, an abandoned mining complex, low orbit. Cold winds, a place meant to erase people. Before being escorted to the shuttle, my mother tried to hold my hand. For a second, I saw in her eyes a chance for repair. Then she looked at my father and turned away. It was the loudest silence I've ever heard. The boarding was quiet. The ship that carried me was smaller than I'd imagined as a child. Still, for me, it was a cell with windows that opened to nothing. As we departed, I watched New Eden shrink until it became a red dot. I thought that from that distance I might finally see who I was, but all I saw was distance. Deimos Reach was cold, functional, and empty. The first days were harsh lessons in autonomy, fixing filters that had never been cleaned, reviving half-dead batteries, resetting forgotten codes. I slept in a flickering module with a clock that didn't care about my thoughts. Sometimes I sat by the hatch just watching Mars, its distant red glow and the dome of New Eden that seemed to stare back without compassion. One of those nights I noticed a new point in the sky. At first I thought it was a star. Then it grew, stretched, gained a blue tail and a presence that didn't belong to the map. Local sensors marked it as an interstellar object. A visitor, scientists said, 3I Atlas. The news spread fast. Scientific curiosity, political caution, military suspicion. For the official colony, it was a mystery to be catalogued. For me, it was intimate shock, a question without language. Why had something so strange appeared just when I was so far from what I once called home? The following days were filled with official radio waves, communication between planets, research centers, and capitals. The object traveled silently and steadily, reacting to no probe or signal. Some said it was only a comet behaving oddly. Others saw it as a sign. Alone in my metal solitude, I felt something else, an invitation, as if the strangeness in the sky had recognized the strangeness in me. The first signals from 3I Atlas couldn't be decoded quickly. There were patterns, tones, harmonic repetitions that coastal engineers began mapping. One night, as I repaired a gravity stabilizer, my speakers caught a strange rhythm, a pulsing sequence that sounded like speech. When linguists later analyzed and compared it to ancient Martian dialects, they were shocked. Parts of the message echoed languages believed to be extinct. The message? Short, direct. Instantly a stone in the path of those who thought they understood the universe. Reclaim what was denied. For the authorities, it was a political enigma. For theologians, a prophecy. For the military, a threat. For me, it was a calling, something I could finally touch. It didn't speak of theory. It spoke of stolen legacies, erased names, and places where someone once said, "You don't belong here." That's when I decided to build. Not out of vengeance, not as defiance against my father, but as a practical response to being erased. I started small, collecting abandoned mining drones, reconnecting solar panels, installing desalination cells that turned orbital ice into water. I didn't have many resources, but I had something else, people. At first, a few wanderers came, a technician who'd lost his license for arguing with an inspector, an engineer criticized for mixing Earth and Martian designs, a veteran who never adapted to the rhythm of the court. They arrived quietly, looked around, and stayed. Within months, our improvised shelter became something more than metal modules. It became home. We called it Nova Origin. A simple, almost defiant name. There was poetry and provocation in it. A place where origin wasn't inherited by blood, but built by choice. In the first weeks, we argued about trivial things, where to place a panel, which frequency to use for communication. Over time, a different culture formed. Knowledge exchange, horizontal councils, decisions by consensus. No crowns, no bloodlines. As Nova Origin grew, the blue object above us seemed more than scientific curiosity. It was a beacon. 3i Atlas crossed our nights, and its glow altered our lives. Children sang about it. Artists carved its tale into mosaics, and scientists visited to study what they called a social experiment. The more we built, the more powerful became the idea that what was denied could be reclaimed, not through pity, but creation. Naturally, not everyone welcomed Nova Origin. Official transmissions from the Martian government grew colder, sharper. My father sent an informal order: dismantle the settlement. He expected bureaucracy to scare us into dispersing, but instead patrol ships appeared. They arrived as dark silhouettes on the horizon, voices of the past echoing through static. Tension hung thick, ready to break into violence. On the eve of confrontation, while we planned evacuation routes, something unexpected happened. 3i Atlas shifted its course, not abruptly, but just enough to position itself between our orbit and the Martian fleet. For 6 minutes, every Martian communication system went dark. A blackout. Weapons froze. When power returned, their access codes were corrupted, altered by something no one understood. No one fired. No one gave orders. Something beyond our comprehension had intervened. The event fueled theories and fear. Some called it protection, others a warning. To me, it was confirmation. Nova Origin wasn't just a refuge, it was a signal. And when soon after a clearer transmission from 3i Atlas was decoded, the words echoed through every dome, every speaker, every breath. Origin is not inherited. It is created. Those words became our manifesto. We carved them on walls, recorded them in school archives, printed them on work contracts. It wasn't just a motto, it was a method. How would we shape ourselves now that we had permission, self-granted, to define our own beginning? Nova Origin grew beyond survival. We built hydro farms, opened trade routes with Earth outposts, founded a small academy. Youths from New Eden came, curious not as emissaries of the old order, but as seekers of something new. Some stayed. Others returned to Mars with stories that shook the foundations of power. Then my father came back. Not in parades, but in a simple ship without escort, a journey of understanding or perhaps redemption. He walked through the corridors of Nova Origin slowly, like a man moving through a place where he no longer had moral authority. He looked at the farms, the panels, the children running free. When he finally stood before me, I thought I'd see the same ruler who once condemned me. Instead, he removed his helmet, hands trembling, and asked, "You built this?" I took a deep breath. Inside me were years of withheld words. I could have answered with anger or pride, but I said, "We built this," because Nova Origin was never mine alone. It was built by all those who had been told they didn't belong. He lowered his head. "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought purity was strength. It was blindness." It was the shortest and heaviest confession I'd ever heard. And somehow, with those words, something loosened inside my chest, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Years later, when 3i Atlas finally drifted away into the darkness of space, it left a trail of light, like a promise burning across the void. It didn't leave us technology, nor a message of origin, but it left understanding. The universe had looked back at us, reminding us of a truth only we could fulfill. The lesson wasn't cosmic, it was intimate. If belonging was a construction, then we were the architects of our laws, our memories, our stories. Now, when I look up at the night sky and see sometimes a faint blue dot moving across memory, I think of my father's words at that dinner, and how they became fuel. I think of the faces that arrived without pasts, who now have children with names spoken freely. I think of when Nova Origin was nothing but flickering lights in the void, and how every panel, every circuit, every story told by the fires became a reclamation of what was once denied to us. They told me I didn't belong on Mars. The universe, however, chose to see us. And the faceless visitor, the one who crossed the sky and spoke without explanation, chose, in its own incomprehensible way, to recognize us. In the end, belonging is not a seat someone offers out of charity. It's a place you build. I didn't just search for a place to stay. I built one. And when 3i Atlas shone above our domes, I knew that no matter how hard the past tried to erase us, we had already built something greater, a legacy of our own making. And if they ask who I was before all of this, I'll answer with the same simplicity of the boy once denied a home. They told me I didn't belong on Mars, so I built my own planet.